everyone, I hope you're doing well. My name is Logan. In today's video, I'm going to be unboxing and reading the entire series of Before the Coffee Gets Cold in 24 Hours. Each book in this series takes place at a time-traveling cafe where visitors can visit somebody of their choice one last time. But of course, a deal this good comes with a few catches. The main one being that no matter what you do in the past, nothing will change in the present. For this 24-hour readathon, I will be using the timer method, and the readathon will be over either when it reaches 24 hours or I finish all 3 books. I'm beyond excited to read this series, and I feel like it's the perfect time in my life to do so. I've been feeling really lost thinking about my past, present, and the future, and I feel like these books could really help give me some perspective, and who doesn't love escaping into another world as soon as you open the page? Here we are with the Amazon package. Hello everyone, I officially started reading Before the Coffee Gets Cold and it is snowing heavily outside. We have gotten probably 3 feet of snow and it just has created the most cozy atmosphere to start this readathon in, and I'm so excited. I've been having little fire crackling noises on in Spotify and I've just been falling in love with reading this book. I finished the first chapter in a little under an hour, and we were just introduced to the rules of the cafe, such as having to sit in one specific spot in order to time travel, having to have gone to the cafe previously with the person that you want to meet in the past, being unable to change the present, and finishing the coffee in the past before it gets cold in order to come back to the future. I loved seeing how our main character changed her thought process with each new rule discovered because she originally wanted to go back in time and talk to her ex-boyfriend before they split. I really like this rule because it would just be too easy to go into the past and say the correct responses to get a different outcome for your future, but by creating a rule that makes it so no matter what you do in the past, nothing in the present will change, it forces the characters to evaluate what they want to get out of the interaction. The one criticism that I have is that we were introduced to a lot of characters that have connections to the cafe, and I wasn't able to properly keep track of them. I did notice that there is a character chart in book 2 and 3 relating the characters to each other's, but I didn't want to spoil myself by reading everybody's connections too soon. I'm sure that the confusion will sort itself out as I keep reading, and I can't wait to see how everybody's lives are intertwined with this time-traveling cafe. I just opened the book to start reading chapter 2 and realized that I was holding the entirely wrong book that entire clip, so I love that for me. I just finished the second story and the feels are hitting. The first majority of the chapter focused on the dynamics of the cafe before slowly revealing who was the next person to time travel. And for this chapter, we followed a woman who's going back in time to receive a letter from her husband before his memory began to fade. And oh my gosh, does this hit hard. I'm definitely gonna need a moment to process all of that emotional damage because geez. When you read this chapter, guys, you're gonna need a few tissues. So I just finished book 1 and I really enjoyed it. I feel like each chapter is similar to an episode of an anime that takes place in a cafe. Each chapter we follow a different time traveler while learning more and more about the regulars and the staff who run the cafe. In chapter 3, we mainly follow a woman who wants to see her sister one last time, and in chapter 4, we follow a mother wanting to visit the daughter that she never got to meet. Each story weaves into each other and creates a beautiful link between the cafe goers, and everyone who experiences time travel truly comes out with a change of heart. This entire book reminds me of the phrase that you never know what somebody is going through. When you're on the train, waiting in line, learning in class, or enjoying a cup of coffee at a cafe, everybody around you has their own story to tell and is going through their own journey. Each chapter is so diverse and they all pull at your heartstrings in different ways. While each story revolves around regrets, we see how different characters overcome these feelings and are able to move on for the better. Also, chapter 3 began with some random schoolgirl coming and visiting the past and nobody knew who she was or why she wanted to meet one of the cafe's staff employees. And I really brushed this off, and it wasn't until the end of chapter 4 that everything unfolded, and it was so beautiful. I knew that I would figure it out eventually, but damn did that sting. I literally had to go back and read the beginning of chapter 3 again to piece it all together, and I was like, oh. In book 2, we've traveled a few years into the future and we follow the same cast of Cafe staff, and I looked at the relationship map at the beginning of the book thinking that I was just going to be giving a brief summary of the characters that we met in the last book, but it gave really heavy spoilers into our next cast of characters. Like, after reading that somebody died who I didn't even meet yet, I realized that I should probably just skip past this page for now. In our first story, we follow a man who goes back to see his best friend who died 22 years ago, and this man has been raising the daughter that his deceased friend left behind, and we watch his struggle with feeling like he's not the real father. Despite raising her since she was a baby, he hasn't been able to tell her the truth about her biological father. And from my point of view, our time traveler is her real father, even if he's not biological. He's the one who raised her, and she doesn't even know her biological father. So I really didn't understand why he was so paranoid about this. Like, dude was legit ready to tell his daughter the truth, not go to her wedding, and disappear from her life forever. Like, man, the guilt should not be that bad. He really should have just told her the truth years ago so that he didn't have to carry this burden, but, you know, whatever. As an adopted child myself, I feel like it shouldn't be a huge deal. Like, why would him not being the biological father make her love him any less if he's been raising her all of this time? I thought this chapter had some good commentary on the emotions that non-biological parents may feel towards their children, feeling as if they're not enough since they're not blood related, and I'm happy with how the chapter ended and the enlightenment that our main character got after traveling back in time. After that story, we follow a son who didn't come home for his mother's funeral, as well as a lover who travels to see the girl that he couldn't marry. And at this point in the story, I feel like I already understood the routine, and these two didn't particularly stand out to me. We've heard the cafe rules 5 times already, and there wasn't anything particularly new happening. Like, sure, it was a new character experiencing the cafe for the first time, but it was starting to just get a little bit old. Perhaps I just didn't click with those 2 stories, but I felt like it was getting a bit repetitive. Somebody has a regret, they want to go back in the past, they learn that they can't change anything in the past, and then they decide to go anyways and come back a better person. With each chapter revolving around the same narrative, it's hard to keep every new story exciting. Either the plot for the characters has to be vastly different or something new that we hadn't seen before needs to happen. One thing that I noticed at the start of each chapter was the description of the changing seasons. The beginning paragraph of the last chapter in book 2 really stood out to me, and I thought it was really beautifully done. People tend to feel happy when spring arrives, especially after a cold winter. When spring begins, however, cannot be pinpointed to one particular moment. There is no one day that clearly marks when winter ends and spring begins. Spring hides inside winter. We notice it emerging with our eyes, our skin, and other senses. We find it in new buds, a comfortable breeze, and the warmth of the sun. It exists alongside winter. Like, can you not with that one? I was gonna try to watch the movie for you guys, but it appears that it's only available on Disney Plus that I don't have, and I was trying to watch it on an alt website, but it keeps giving me ads every 5 minutes, and it's driving me absolutely insane. So I'm not gonna be able to give you guys a full reaction to the movie, but from what I could see so far, I am not impressed with it at all, and I feel like it might ruin the book for me. The movie's just really corny, the acting is a bit questionable, and they're not really following all of the rules that we saw in the cafe. We also don't get to see all of the characters in our monologue and see what's going on in their heads, which was something I really enjoyed about reading the books. And when we don't get that, all of the characters' actions just seem really impulsive, stupid, and naive. One of my favorite things about books is how you can kind of picture anything you want in your head about what characters look like, sound like, or the descriptions of the places you're in. And then when you see a movie, you're like, oh, that was not what I pictured in my head. Well, tell me why this girl's boyfriend looks like this. In book 3, we follow Nagare, Cafe Funikala's owner, and Kazu, the cafe's waitress, as they visit another time-traveling cafe with the same rules that was originally owned by Nagare's mother, who is currently in America. Our first story followed a daughter who resented her deceased parents for leaving her orphaned, and this was probably my least favorite story out of the entire series so far. With so many hard-hitting stories, this one just felt really one note to me. It started off sad and ended with a change of heart, and it's nothing that we haven't seen before, and it's not anything that I'm going to cry over. The rest of the stories, however, packed much more of a punch. In the second story, we followed a comedian who aches for his deceased wife and their shared dream. He'd finally achieved the dream that they had together, and without her there, he felt like there was nothing left. The author also related our main character's struggle to those of professional athletes. It's really the question, I achieved my dreams, now what? These books ask a lot of hard questions, and we see how different characters answer them. I love books that make you question your own morals, and chapters like these are the ones that I go back to and rave about to my friends. The other stories in book 3 followed a sister whose grief for her deceased sister has become all-consuming, as well as a man who realized his love for his childhood friends. Both of these revolved around death, grief, and regrets, similar to the other stories that we've seen in this book. Throughout book 3, we also follow Sachi, Kazu's daughter, as she reads a book called 100 Questions. This book has 100 questions that cause one to really think, such as, if the world was going to end tomorrow, would you tell your 10-year-old child the truth, or would you shoulder the burden and let them live a happy last day? Sachi asks the cafe regulars these questions throughout book 3, as well as each visitor. Each question is followed up with an explanation as to why they chose that answer, and it usually tends to aid them in their journey, whether that's before they time travel or just in their regular lives. Of the stories throughout the series, my favorites were the ones that helped us get to know the cafe staff more. Rather than a random person visiting the cafe to travel back in time once, we got to see how time traveling truly affected the character for multiple years and not just one instance. Despite this, I think that every new character had well-explained backstories and reasonings as to why they want to time travel. Overall, I think this was a great series, and each chapter really felt like an episode of a TV show. And while the stories are somewhat standalone, they read the best as an ordered unit. The cafe staff and patrons are likable, and you want to see their transformations before and after time traveling. The cafe truly feels magical on how it can change somebody's thinking, but in reality, it would not be such an instant change like how we see in the book. Somebody deciding to time travel on a whim is far more likely to mess up what they want to do, and they're not going to know what they want to say to the person they're visiting. And even after seeing somebody just as you planned, you're not always going to have this enormous weight lifted from your shoulders immediately. Emotions take time to process, and healing isn't instant. This is fiction, and to keep the story going, it makes sense that each character has this huge revelation while they're traveling, going from complete despair and all hope is lost to beginning to feel like there's something they can do about their lives and feeling the will to live again and having motivation in minutes before the coffee gets cold. But it's important to recognize that in real life, that's very much not the case. Grief comes and goes, and there's good days and bad days, and things don't immediately get better after one event. Before the Coffee Gets Cold is a great book series, and there's so many positive themes and messages throughout. My favorite story was the lover who goes back in time to receive a letter from her husband whose memory began to fade. That shit was so sad, and it genuinely made me cry. Reading this series has been a complete blast. I originally hoped to read the entire series in 24 hours, but I only ended up needing 7. I love you all so much and hope to see you guys in the next video.